Thank you. Thank you very much for that amazing example of transformation. Don, perhaps I can hand over to you now, please.
Thank you very much, Charles. The whole theme of this conference is on partnerships. The previous speaker mentioned the importance of bringing the public and the private sector together. I'd like to suggest we have three sectors: the public government, we have the second sector, which is the private for-profit, the commercial interest, but I think it's extremely important for us to recognize the third sector. The third sector are all of the organizations that represent the people in the regions that are going to be affected by any form of development. These are community organizations, environmental, cultural heritage, and even informal associations that represent handicraft, food producers, and so on. Well, with that in mind, I'd like to focus on one case. It's a case of Haiti. As you may recall, Haiti suffered a devastating earthquake in 2010. In terms of geography, Haiti is located on the island of Hispaniola. The other side benefits tremendously from tourism. That's the Dominican Republic. Haiti has suffered not only economically, but has been out of the tourism mix. After the hurricane, several of the development banks took interest in developing the potential or even restoring any form of economic growth potential, and they looked to the north because the north was not affected by the hurricane. The north has a very outstanding world-class attraction. It's called the Citadel La Ferie. It was enshrined as a World Heritage Site in 1982. It was built after the independence of Haiti, following a slave revolution, and it incurred some 20,000 workers from the period 1805 to 1820 to build this structure. It's the largest fort in the Americas. It's a tremendously outstanding resource, and it would be the reason for people to visit the north of Haiti. There are two major urban settlements. One is Cap-Haïtien. It's the second largest city in Haiti, and the other is the small town of Milo, which is basically at the foothills of the Citadel attraction. The two banks that got involved were the Inter-American Development Bank, and they were going to develop a destination management strategy and an organization for the northern region. And the other was the World Bank, who was going to put together an urban regeneration program for the region, including both Milo and Cap-Haïtien. But the private sector waited, and nothing seemed to happen. And President Bill Clinton was engaged by President Martelly at that time to help develop resources within North America. And he reached out to an organization that I was involved in. It's called Tourism Cares. Tourism Cares is the philanthropy of the U.S. Tour Operators Association, National Tour Association, and the American Society of Travel Agents. And he asked us to send a group over to see what we can do. Well, we did visit, and we did kind of a very rapid visitor experience scan of the region, and noted that many of the local people benefited tremendously from the visit to the Citadel. It's about a 6-mile hike if you walk, but most people basically took horses that were attended by 2 to 3 young men. And there are about 150 horses that sustain tremendous economic benefits for the local people, and they also sell coconut milk and souvenirs to the tourists. At the same time, we took a little concern that the Royal Caribbean cruise lines expected to land over 1 million passengers at their port of Labadee did a survey and found out that some 10 to 15% of the people would be interested in the Citadel experience. That would be a tremendous new impact, facilitated by a new road so they could bus directly to the Citadel. Some concerns we have with that flow of visitors would be that perhaps there would not be enough support to continue the horse, and they may move toward mechanized systems, therefore disturbing the economic benefits to the local people. Well, the outcome of that was we formed a coalition. We were able to influence both the government. In fact, the Ministry of Tourism joined the coalition and organized the Association of Tourist Businesses, in Haiti. And we began to develop resources to assist in the process. Some of them were information in nature, technical assistance, developed a heritage tour guide training program, and we enlisted the support of the National Park Service to develop a kind of a visitor management plan and a way of organizing an authority to manage the historic resources, both the Citadel and Sanssouci. So in short, this intervention that was developed by Tourism Cares represents a catalytic action. In my experience, working in many World Heritage sites and working with development assistance agencies, we find that they need help. And the communities are very powerful allies, as well as the organizations that are there to protect and conserve heritage. Just a couple takeaways from my experience there. It's really very, very important to utilize that third sector, particularly the scientific, the academic, the volunteer, the educational resources that are available, because there are tremendous complexities in developing the plans and the strategies in order to comply with World Heritage conventions and also governmental regulations, and even more importantly, the rules and regulations of donor agencies. And the last point, I think, is let's be sure to involve that third sector in all phases of partnership development. That means the planning, the decision-making, and even more importantly, the benefit sharing. I think it's important that we try to influence, particularly in the developing countries, the third sector in helping to form more enlightened, more inclusive, more equitable strategies funded through donor agencies and other agency activities in these destinations. Last point is we use the term PPP, public-private partnerships. I'd like to suggest that we put another P, public, private, and people partnerships. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Now over to Javier Bello. Look forward to that.
Muy buenas tardes, queridas autoridades, queridos amigos, querido moderador y excelencias que me acompañan en este panel, en esta mesa. Querido también Taleb Rifai, amigo y sobre todo la persona que ha motivado que yo esté aquí hoy y que incidió en que estuviera hablando en nombre de las ciudades de España. Querido Miguel Ángel Recio, director general de Bellas Artes del Gobierno de España y la cabeza de la delegación española en este acto. Queridos amigos, en nombre del Gobierno de España, en el que me honro presentar o representar, quiero transmitir a todos los participantes en esta Convención Mundial de la UNWTO UNESCO, que ha organizado en este maravilloso país, nuestro más cordial y afectuoso saludo, de esa forma que los españoles solemos hacer. Muy especialmente al Reino de Camboya y a todos los camboyanos que nos han acogido de esta forma tan encantadora e ilusionante. Pero quiero, y aquí me detengo, porque quiero especialmente agradecer a los cientos de jóvenes voluntarios, estudiantes que están ahí fuera y que están haciendo que nuestra estancia sea más cómoda y a la que les pido que todos ustedes les den un fuerte aplauso. Muchas gracias a todos y la verdad es que como alcalde de Alcalá de Henares, una ciudad de 200.000 habitantes a tan solo 30 kilómetros de la capital de España, de Madrid, es para mí un honor estar aquí presente en esta conferencia y acompañarles a todos ustedes, distinguidas autoridades de los diferentes países. Y como presidente del Grupo de Ciudades Patrimonio de la Humanidad de España, es una responsabilidad estar aquí porque vengo a hablar en nombre de 15 alcaldes, de 15 ciudades. España es una gran nación y una potencia en turismo, y así nos lo dan los datos. 65 millones de personas nos han visitado a lo largo de 2014, lo que nos hace ser el tercer país en número de receptores visitantes. Somos un país en extensión relativamente pequeño, pero tenemos más de 8.000 kilómetros de playas, en el que 573 playas y más de 108 puertos deportivos están nominados en la Unión Europea con bandera azul, por lo tanto, las de mayor calidad. Somos el primer país de la Unión Europea en esta potencia. 3/4 partes del turismo que llega a España lo hace buscando sol y playa, además de otras cosas que tiene nuestro país. Pero España, y vengo a hablar de ello, es además un verdadero museo al aire libre, una verdadera exposición permanente de nuestro país y nuestra forma de ser. Somos el tercer país en declaraciones de la UNESCO en el mundo, con 44 nominaciones de bienes, de las cuales 15 son ciudades patrimonio, de las cuales yo soy el presidente y represento. Una oferta de España que hace precisamente que transmita la realidad del pueblo español y de los españoles, basado fundamentalmente en nuestro rico patrimonio natural, en el importante legado y patrimonio cultural, pero sobre todo también en la forma de ser de los españoles y en un verdadero patrimonio inmaterial. Y hoy, el Grupo de Ciudades Patrimonio de la Humanidad, concesión de la UNESCO de tal título, está aquí con el nombre de su presidente representando a 15 ciudades. 15 ciudades que son las 15 joyas, con otras más, pero no tienen la denominación de la UNESCO, las 15 joyas de la corona de España. 15 ciudades que te abren la puerta a la historia de España y a la forma de vivir de los españoles. Representamos estas 15 ciudades un legado histórico único en el mundo. Pero también los alcaldes somos alcaldes de 15 ciudades con sus habitantes, que necesitan cosas actualmente, que están orgullosos de su ciudad, que reciben con los brazos abiertos, pero que necesitan el día a día. Ir a los supermercados, a los hospitales, coger el transporte público, las mejoras en las infraestructuras, y eso hace que conviva precisamente y tenga cada vez más razón de ser los trabajos que conjuntamente hemos hecho en este grupo de ciudades. Da además la coincidencia que somos 15 alcaldes de diferente partido político y de diferente signo político y de diferente región de España, con lo cual, con la descentralización administrativa y política, a veces parece que complica más esta relación, pero no solamente no la complica, sino que la mejora y la potencia. Trabajamos fundamentalmente bajo la presidencia con la Asamblea de Alcaldes que preside y tiene toda la potestad, y la comisión ejecutiva formada por 5 alcaldes. Y esa comisión ejecutiva, además, se desglosa en 3 comisiones de trabajo. La Comisión de Educación y Cultura, que es la comisión doméstica, por decirlo de alguna forma, y la que pretende fundamentalmente crear una red y una base de información de todos los hitos y eventos culturales de nuestras 15 ciudades y crear precisamente una agenda cultural propia. Y además, también la pata de educación, que lo que pretende es formar a nuestros jóvenes, educar a nuestros chicos y jóvenes en que son los vecinos y los habitantes de unas ciudades que han heredado, de unas ricas ciudades heredadas con un legado histórico incomparable que tienen que cuidar en un futuro y que tienen que heredar también para sus hijos. Luego tenemos una comisión que se abre al exterior, la Comisión de Trabajo de Turismo y Promoción, que es la que está presente o la que trabaja para estar presente en todos los foros internacionales y en casi todas las regiones del mundo en las distintas ferias de turismo. Y también es la que se encarga de la comunicación externa e interna. Y luego tenemos la Comisión de Patrimonio, que es transversal a estas dos comisiones anteriores, que vela por el buen estado de nuestro patrimonio cultural y artístico, que lo protege, que lo moderniza, que lo analiza y estudia y lo pone en valor. Y todo ello apoyado por técnicos de los diferentes ayuntamientos en los que estamos representados y por los diferentes concejales expertos en el ramo. En estas distintas comisiones nosotros trabajamos precisamente en pos del mantenimiento y el apoyo a nuestras ciudades. Y hoy, dentro del panel que me ha tocado, hay que reforzar precisamente la de patrimonio y ciudad. Patrimonio y ciudad, como he dicho, trabaja en 4 bloques fundamentalmente. La seguridad contra incendios y además emergencias. De ahí que hace muy poquitas semanas hayamos firmado un convenio con el cuerpo de élite del Ejército Español, la Unidad Militar de Emergencias, que actúa fundamentalmente en casos de catástrofe y que no tenía la especialidad ni la especialización de la protección del patrimonio histórico, y eso se lo hemos enseñado en el Grupo Ciudades Patrimonio. Pero también trabajamos en materia de accesibilidad y movilidad. Nuestras ciudades tienen que adaptarse al turista de hoy en día, pero sobre todo tienen que adaptarse al vecino de hoy en día. No es lo mismo pasear por el casco histórico de Ávila, de Toledo, de Salamanca, de Santiago, de Tarragona, de Córdoba, de Ibiza, por cualquiera de ellas. No es lo mismo hace 20 años que hoy, en el que el tráfico en la mayoría de ellos está restringido, pero cada día nuestros cascos históricos, lejos de quedarse sin vecinos, cada vez tienen más vecinos y, sobre todo, una población joven y pujante que apuesta por vivir y proteger el patrimonio histórico de nuestras ciudades. El otro bloque, el tercer bloque, es el de urbanismo y patrimonio. Aquí, fundamentalmente, somos muy cuidadosos, nosotros mismos, que somos alcaldes, de lo que la normativa de nuestros planes generales de ordenación urbana permiten y no permiten hacer. Estamos vigilados por el Gobierno de España, como debe ser, y estamos vigilados por el Gobierno de nuestras respectivas comunidades autónomas o gobiernos regionales. Pero al final, los ayuntamientos, los alcaldes y sus concejales saben perfectamente cuál es lo mejor, qué es lo mejor y cuál es aquello que no es lo mejor para la ciudad. Y luego tenemos la cuarta pata. La cuarta pata, que para nosotros es muy importante porque no entendemos nuestras ciudades fuera del medio ambiente o del hábitat natural en el que están. La ciudad es lo que es también porque se mueve en un hábitat natural que protegemos. Y de ahí que la pata de medio ambiente y sostenibilidad sea importante y fundamental para el desarrollo de las ciudades. Y ahí analizamos hasta los desórdenes poblacionales de aquellas aves que habitan en nuestros monumentos y que pueden quedar románticas, pero a veces también hacen peligrar la existencia de los mismos. Nosotros queremos, y en eso estamos trabajando, tener presencia, y la marca Grupo Ciudades Patrimonio y la Humanidad en España, aparte, trabaja con la colaboración público-privada que estábamos hablando anteriormente, con distintos organismos e instituciones de España, del Gobierno nacional y del Gobierno regional, pero también con empresas privadas como Iberia, la compañía aérea, Renfe, la Red Nacional de Ferrocarriles, Paradores, la cadena hotelera por excelencia de máxima calidad de nuestra ciudad, con otras cadenas hoteleras o con otras compañías. Y nos hemos segmentado, y con esto voy a terminar para dejar paso a las preguntas luego, nos hemos segmentado en todas las posibilidades de turismo que existen en nuestras ciudades, porque lo bueno de venir a las ciudades patrimonio no es venir a verlas, sino venir a vivirlas y sentirlas tal y como las sentimos cada uno de los ciudadanos. Y de ahí que hablemos de turismo cultural, pero también la importancia y la presencia de la religión en España es fundamental, y que hablemos de turismo religioso, o también del turismo de congresos. Nuestras ciudades están en un marco único para realizar cualquier tipo de congresos y reuniones. O fundamentalmente, teniendo ciudades como Salamanca y Alcalá de Henares, hablar del turismo idiomático y venir a estudiar español. O la mesa española, el turismo gastronómico. Cualquiera de nuestras ciudades tiene una excelente materia prima y una mejor cocina que hace las maravillas de todos los que nos visitan. O el turismo natural, nuestros entornos naturales únicos en un país, como decía, no de demasiada extensión, pero con una diversidad increíble. O el turismo deportivo. Y con ello, señoras y señores, dejaré paso. I apologize to speak in Spanish, but I am the mayor of the city of Alcalá de Henares. Alcalá de Henares is the place of birth of Miguel de Cervantes, the best writer in Spanish and in Spain, and Miguel de Cervantes told me, speak in Spanish. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And lastly, but of course not least, Pansy Ho. Thank you.
Excellencies and distinguished guests, I'm extremely honored to have been invited to speak at this very important gathering amongst esteemed speakers. I am the 2 Ps out of the 3 Ps that Mr. Hawkins had referred to, the private commercial and the private people sector. Macau, as most would know, is a very small city in size, but is gigantic with respect to its history and culture. Since the Portuguese landed in Macau in the mid-16th century, it has become a very important trading port, facilitating trade and cultural exchange, connecting the Western world with China, becoming an important point on the maritime Silk Road. Until today, now after the return of sovereignty to China 15 years ago, Macau still continues to serve its country as the crossroad for the East and West, being designated by China as the center for Sino-Portuguese speaking countries. Macau has demonstrated throughout history that it has been able to sustain diverse cultures, be it customs, traditions, art, music, gastronomy, and architecture. Macau's harmonious coexistence of cultures is the joint effort of its people due to the love of our country, respect for our unique culture, and the conviction of its leaders and investors to continue and extend our culture and heritage. After the return of sovereignty, Macau is created as a special administrative region. It benefited from the vision and efforts of its brilliant leader. Joining us today is our former chief executive, Mr. Ho, who devised a master plan allowing tourism economy to thrive, led by Macau's gaming expertise, for the purposes of building necessary resources and reserves and infrastructure to stimulate sustainable economic growth and stable social environment. Now, with a population of only less than 600,000, Macau has grown to become a world-renowned destination that receives an annual catchment of 38 million visitors. Macau now has the solid foundation upon which to further diversify its tourism economy. It is heading towards a new phase of development in cultural tourism with its focus on the arts and culture, creative industries, leisure and hospitality, capitalizing on its rich historical assets against a backdrop of modern urbanization. My family has been fortunate enough to be a major player and investor in Macau for over 50 years. I have personally 20 years of operating in Macau, observing and experiencing changes and transformation in its path. Throughout many economic and political changes, we, as the private sector, have been steadfast in our long-term investment philosophy of driving economic gains at the same time in building an industry with best practices to harness responsible tourism growth and preserving the cultural integrity of Macau's heritage. As investors and entrepreneurs, our role is to innovate and create value. It is up to us how to deploy and apply our resources. I will give you some life examples. Not a lot, because we have only 5 minutes, but we can elaborate later. We take initiatives to build and design architecture that serves as an extension of the unique characteristic of our cityscape and instill a new sense of urban identity and culture that integrates and complements rather than destroying our environment. We, many a time, has piloted and undertaken initiatives to collaborate with the government, using our own resources in both financial terms and intangible resources like relations and network to help promote modernization of old traditions. Just to drop a few examples, we organize lion dance contests, which is a very old cultural activity, and we help sometimes to bring together interesting and innovative ideas to promote our existing functions and events being organized each year already by the government, including, for instance, I was the person who pioneered the Jackie Chan celebrity race at the Macau Grand Prix. So as you see, Macau is indeed a living proof that public-private partnership can be a successful formula. In my new capacity now, also as the vice chairperson of the Tourism Chamber Commerce in China, it is important that we learn from these practical experiences and utilize this as a new way and a new blueprint to help China in developing its cultural tourism toward urban regeneration, in cultural preservation and reinvention. With that, I'm going to stop, and I would like to leave the stage for more questionings later. Thank you.
Well, thank you all, panel. That was wonderful. And what that means is we can now have a conversation between each other, and then we'll also have a conversation with the audience. Can I, Sheikha Khalifa, start with you? What I felt when you were talking, there was a lot of passion, somehow passion and love. I realize it was originally your grandfather's house. So how important is passion was my first question. And secondly, I also felt, because you described you started with one building, then another, and then another, and it went on to 25 buildings. And in that process, it seems you also began to involve other people. Can you just firstly say how important passion is, and secondly, how this involvement with the others happened?
بالطبع. المحرك الأول هو الحب. نحن دائما نقول أن الحب هو طاقة وإبداع. دون الحب، دون الإيمان بالمهمة التي نقوم بها، دون الشعور الموازي لأي عمل، لا تكون هناك حقيقة لمشاريعنا. البداية كانت مع البيت الأول الذي جاءت المصادفة لتقودني إلى موقعه، ولأنني أحب المكان ولأنني أحب أن أحافظ على ذاكرة المكان، تكاملت الصورة مع عدد من البيوت. ثم كان لابد أن نمد علاقة وجسور مع مؤسسات أخرى، مع القطاع الخاص الذي آمن بالمهمة، فكان كل بيت من البيوت الأخرى له داعم معين، أما مؤسسة أو بنك أو شخص آخر آمن مثلنا بأن الأماكن تعود إليها الحياة حين نحبها. وأختم بعبارة دائما أقولها أو أرددها في كل محفل: البلدان لا توجد بلدان متخلفة، وإنما بلاد تخلف أبنائها عن حبها. إذا أمنا ببلداننا وأحببناها لابد أن ننشر الجمال في كل موقع فيها. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to you a bit later, if I may. Dato, what I noticed in Malacca and Penang is after and a bit before the World Heritage designation, Penangites and people began to come back and began to become investors in their own place, and whereas before they'd gone away to Singapore and so on. How true is that, or was that just me not seeing the true picture?
It is very true, because we had our independence in 1957, And in the late 60s and early 70s, Malaysia went through very intensive development of the country, as a result of which there were so many modern buildings. And the tendency was for us to leave the old houses and we moved to the new apartments and all that. And as a result, many of the houses in Malacca and Penang were left behind. They were vacant, abandoned. But then when we were given the recognition of UNESCO city sites, you are right. The owners of the shop houses, the old houses, they realized that there is no value to the houses, and they came back. And as a result of that, they did the renovation to the houses, to the shop houses, and they actually make money out of it. So it's very true. You're very right that they came back to their hometowns.
Sandra Howe-Taylor, what I find interesting about your story is a couple of things. One, in a sense, this sort of deep transformation. There must have been something culturally inside Medellin people to really reuse cultural resources again. And what I find very stimulating about the city is the way that you've made creative urban infrastructure. So things we think of as very boring, you've made them look interesting. And also the way, for example, you've reinvented things like libraries in the favelas. So rather than having a small little library, you've made it like the biggest icon that one can imagine. Can you just elaborate on that a bit, please?
It's clear that you've been to Colombia and to Medellin and that you know a lot of what's happening there. And I appreciate the opportunity to also express that to this wonderful audience. No doubt, the people from Medellin, the culture of the people from Antioquia, which is the state that Medellin is capital of, they're known as Paisa. And to be Paisa is a whole culture. Like I said, these are descendant from the Spanish side, but also we have a Middle Eastern blood running through. So they're known for being people that has a great passion for life. They are great, very into business. They are entrepreneurs. Like I said, they went from one mountain to the other, founding little towns, and they're actually developing the coffee culture in Colombia. So yes, they have a long tradition of people that has a deep sense of who they are as a community, as a culture, and that transpires through everything what they do. So that's why Medellin, through all the time, has been a very important city, and also known even by the Colombian as the city where you would like to live eventually, because it's not as big as Bogota, but it has a great soul, it has a great heart, not to mention a wonderful climate that's all year round, very mild and pleasant, which made it known as the city of eternal spring. But that is also in the blood of the people, and that's why we have great artists like Botero, who I mentioned, but for the newer generation, Juanes has become an icon of a person that works with the youth, with the children in those barrios, in those comunas, in the favelas, and developing a social project, showing them how important it is that they own their future and they work for it, that nothing is going to fall from heaven, that you actually have to work if you want to have a good life, if you want to have a better life. And those are some of the inspirations that are behind the soul of the people from Antioquia and from Medellin particularly. And the architecture, it's also an expression of that innovative spirit that they have. Medellin was for many years an industrial town, a city where textiles were being produced and sold all through the country and internationally. But then after all this that happened, it changed its single orientation towards the industry, and culture became a very strong stream of life for the people from Medellin. So that's why, like I said, even the parks has a different type of name. It's not a boring city. It's a city that is very much alive wherever you turn around, and the people enjoy their city. They are able, no matter if you are from a very poor community or if you live and you have the opportunity to be in a better situation, you also get to enjoy the city in a lot of common spaces.
Thank you very much, and I'll come and get back to you all at the end. Don, what I found interesting and important in your contribution is you were reminding us not only of the fourth P, people, public, private, and so on, but you also talked about other people who are so important in these processes, for example, academics and others. Could you just elaborate a bit on that? Because it's quite a big group we're really talking about here. And the other point I thought you made that I thought was significant, you said that everything should happen right from the beginning. It should be co-conceived, co-created, co-designed. So it's not that you think of the partnership as an afterthought, but you think of it right from the beginning and the conception. Could you just elaborate a bit on those 2 points?
Yeah, that's right. The partnership is actually the result, of inclusive and
Is your thing working, or is my voice just too loud?
Maybe mine. The partnership is actually the result of the process. I wanted to just comment on a few things. We are talking about urban regeneration. And I wanted to bring to your attention research that we've been doing at George Washington University focusing on walkability. Because many of the things that Sandra was talking about can be reflected in places that you could walk to, places where people live, places where people work, and places also where tourists come together. And the walkability concept is almost like in the airline industry, on-time arrivals and departures. If you're doing well there, it means the entire airline system is working well. If you're doing well in terms of walkability in your urban environment, it means the whole system is working well. I think it's important for us to begin to recognize that it's not just one destination management system that you need to develop. It's a constellation of small-scale, almost micro place management approaches, some dealing with shopping, some dealing with gastronomy, some with industry, some with the creative sector. I think we have to rethink the governance models that we've been talking about for many years and bring into play these broader concepts in terms of urban development. I did want to point out that as a result of the catalytic action that was undertaken at the request of Bill Clinton and involvement of the U.S. travel industry, the Destination Management Organization now operates in northern Haiti, and the World Bank awarded a $45 million subsidized loan to begin to develop the urban regeneration program. So it had results, and we feel very proud of the fact that we were able to work collaboratively with our counterparts, in Haiti to achieve a positive result. Thank you.
Thank you. Xavier, 2 points which I thought were interesting in what you were saying was one, really the power of the network, because many of your cities were quite small cities, but together somehow you achieved more. And the other point I think you brought out was the notion of bipartisanship, which seems to be very significant in making projects happen, etc.
Bueno, hay una cuestión que no he contado antes por escaso tiempo que quería mencionar, y es que el éxito precisamente de las ciudades patrimonio de la humanidad, en el caso de España, no viene tanto desde que sea la administración la que lo impulse, que lo impulsó para la obtención de la calificación, sino más bien que tienen que ser desde el principio los propios ciudadanos los que se crean que viven en un entorno patrimonio mundial o histórico. y que además eso le va a limitar precisamente su acción diaria. La restauración de su vivienda, bueno, pues la forma de coger el vehículo le va a transformar por completo la vida y se la va a complicar, y eso es lo que hace precisamente que el ciudadano, cuando se lo cree de verdad y con todo el corazón, luego se lo cuenta al resto y lo muestra con todo orgullo. Pero el poder de la red precisamente en España es importante. Somos 15 ciudades no tan pequeñas y tenemos casi todas ellas, menos 3 son capital, menos 4 son capital de provincia y algunas incluso capitales de las comunidades autónomas o el gobierno regional. Y el poder político de 15 alcaldes, en el que, unidos, sin distinción por el color político, hace que el gobierno regional de turno y sobre todo el gobierno nacional acceda a distintos convenios y acuerdos con las ciudades. Por ejemplo, con Tour España, que es el órgano del Gobierno de la Nación que nos permite la promoción externa. Y precisamente esa dualidad entre la administración y la colaboración privada es la que nos hace ir más allá. En momentos en los que, bueno, pues la escasez de recursos económicos en lo público, tienes que estar buscando financiación en lo privado, porque hay que ser conscientes que estamos hablando aquí de una forma de vida, pero necesitamos la financiación para la mejora de nuestras ciudades.
Thanks. I'm being pushed a bit from over here. They keep on saying finish, so that's why I'm sounding... Normally I'm much more relaxed. Pansy, what I find interesting about Macau is obviously the immense success you've had there. So an interesting final question to our panel is, can there be too many tourists? Sorry, that's perhaps a shock, but can there be too many, given that, you know, Macau is so successful?
Well, we have, as I mentioned, you know, we have always been not really just a final destination. We've always served to be a gateway, you know, really operating on the basis that people would come and they will come through Macau stores and go, you know, to different parts of China and reversely. So in that respect, I think we have proven that we have the capability of handling, but also now we want to add more layers to it. You know, being able to build more multidisciplinary kind of attractions and diversifying ourselves will actually help so that not everybody will come at the same season. For instance, in the tourism trade, you know, there is obviously the reality. It is, you know, restricted by way of seasonality, cycles, people's holidays. So in that respect, if we can try to diversify our basis of attractions, I think we can actually divert some of that cross-traffic and be able to continue to facilitate, you know, in our best capacity.
Thank you. Well, I apologize to the audience that I'm not going to be able to ask you questions, but I think some of the things that have come out here, which I find interesting, is firstly the sort of determination that you've expressed in the projects you're dealing with, that sense of trying to generate some sense of continuity over time. Things do not happen easily overnight. Obviously, that energy that comes from passion and some sense of sort of vision, but combining the micro with the macro. It isn't always the big picture that never happens. It's about perhaps starting with the small, like in your case, that encourages a sort of catalytic effect. And perhaps one of the phrases I think you used, which I thought was very nice, which was saying, owning the future, using in a sense the past in some way to create the future, seemed to me some of the themes. So anyway, could you please thank the panel for their interesting contributions?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles. I think that was a very regenerative session. I'm sure you agree with me. Before we go for a coffee break, and because we will have the formal closing ceremony afterwards, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your presence. To remind you that tonight a gala dinner will be served in the outside garden at 7 o'clock. Kindly offered by the China Chamber of Tourism together with Sun Company of China, and graciously hosted by the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Cambodia. I wish to thank you, remind you that you will receive an evaluation form by email to provide you your views about the conference, and we will have a coffee break, and I would kindly ask you to be back here at 5 o'clock for the closing ceremony. Thank you.